Grace and peace to you, beloved. Amy Wilson Feltz here. I am the pastor of St. Paul's United Methodist Church in El Paso, Texas. Thank you so much for joining me for coffee with Pastor Amy on this Wednesday morning. We are a couple of weeks into the season of Easter, and I have been thinking lately about the ways that we celebrated and observed Holy Week in our community of faith. Many of you know that we offered a service on Good Friday that included the Stations of the Cross, or the readings in our holy text about the final hours of Jesus. If you participated in the service at 7 p.m. on Good Friday, you will have noticed that I skipped a reading. I skipped one of the readings of the Stations of the Cross, which means at St. Paul's this year, Judas never betrayed Jesus, and Jesus was crucified anyway. Now, I can laugh about my mistake. I learned early on in ministry not to take myself too seriously. One of my mentors told me that over lunch. He said, I take what we do very seriously. I take ministry very seriously. I certainly take our role in what God is doing in the world very seriously, but I've learned not to take myself too seriously. And I've adopted that, and it's served me pretty well. So when these tiny mistakes happen, I laugh them off and I go on. But I have been thinking recently about the nature of story and the story that we experience as human beings. And the author of the letter to the Hebrews tells us that Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. Now, that doesn't mean that what we do doesn't have consequences. Certainly, what we do affects everyone around us and human history to some extent as well. We're not just puppets on a stage, but we are participants in this grand narrative of humanity. And what we can trust is that God is at work. God is writing the story. And so when we feel like parts are disjointed, maybe we've skipped a page or two, things aren't going the way that we would hope that they would go, there are tragic parts in the story, we can trust that God is still at work weaving the story together. And the arc of our story, the arc of the human narrative of all of creation, is bent toward grace and justice and forgiveness and new life. That's what we celebrated on Easter. Right? And that's what we continue to celebrate because we are an Easter people. We believe in new life and resurrection. That's why we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, and we trust that it has real meaning for our lives here on earth, in the here and now, and also in the hereafter. God continues to weave that story, and we participate in it. And so I'm finding some comfort in that right now, and I hope that you are as well, because it's very clear that our world is a mess. Truth be told, it's always been a mess. But we have this 24/7 news cycle now, and we're so aware of everything that's going on in the world more than ever before. And we have real reason to grieve and real reason to lament for sure. We also have the opportunity to locate ourselves in the story and to also pinpoint ways that God is at work in the story, inviting us to participate in ways of grace and forgiveness and reconciliation, because we know the resolution of the story. We, as the people of God, as followers of Jesus, as people who seek to live by the Holy Spirit's work in our lives, we know the resolution of the story. It doesn't mean that beginnings are not scary, and doesn't mean that the middle is not difficult, that the plot doesn't thicken, that we don't experience tragedy and suspense, and that our stories don't take turns that we wish that they didn't. But it does mean that we know how things are going to turn out ultimately. We know the resolution, and the resolution is one of new life. New life. New life that can only come from death. That's what we live. That's what we know. And I hope that being reminded of that this week will be encouraging to you. I know that it has been for me. We have so much work to do in this world, but we are not alone, and we are energized by the life of the Spirit within us. We are reminded that this work is good and important when we read the stories of Jesus, and we see God's faithfulness in the pages of our holy text and also in our own lives as well. So that's my prayer for you, that you will continue to see God's work in your life, inviting you to participate in your story in ways that bring about hope and healing in the world. I will continue to pray for that. I hope that you will continue to pray for that as well. And I look forward to being with you here again next week for Coffee with Pastor Amy. Grace and peace.